It's a centralized index of notable clips, headlines, and references being shared across the community, organized for quick browsing. Use it to spot patterns, pull links, and build your own research list. Qnotables.com. Browse the notables, verify the facts, stay informed. All reports can be found on Q Research or Qnotables.com. Notables do not equal endorsements. We are researchers who deal in open source information, reasoned argument, and dank memes. We do battle in the sphere of ideas and ideas only. We neither need nor condone the use of force in our work here.
President Donald Trump has arrived in Beijing for a high-stakes state visit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Air Force One touched down in China as both governments prepared for direct talks on trade, tariffs, military pressure, Taiwan, Iran, artificial intelligence, supply chains, and the future of U.S.-China relations. The visit opened with a major diplomatic welcome at the Great Hall of the People, complete with red carpets, honor guards, flags, military ceremony, and the U.S. national anthem playing for the American president on Chinese soil. Trump and Xi stood together outside the Great Hall of the People, inspected assembled troops, walked the red carpet, and delivered opening statements before moving into closed-door bilateral talks. The public ceremony projected strength and respect, but the private agenda is where the serious business begins. Taiwan, trade, energy, technology, Iran, supply chains, and military competition are all part of the power struggle now being negotiated between Washington and Beijing. Dan Scavino posted from China as President Trump's Beijing visit unfolded, telling Americans to stay tuned through the night as the president's schedule moved forward overseas. Elon Musk was also seen among the first off the plane after President Trump's family, drawing attention because of Musk's deep business ties to China, manufacturing, artificial intelligence, and global technology. His presence added another layer to an already major diplomatic trip. Sean Hannity interviewed Secretary of State Marco Rubio aboard Air Force One as the U.S. delegation headed to Beijing. Rubio said the United States wants China to play a more active role in pushing Iran away from escalation in the Persian Gulf. Rubio's message was direct. China has economic reasons to help stabilize the region, and Washington expects Beijing to understand the cost of wider conflict. Even Rubio's gray Nike tech outfit became part of the online conversation, turning a foreign policy trip into a social media moment. Domestic politics. Vice President J.D. Vance and Dr. Mehmet Oz announced a major federal crackdown on Medicare and Medicaid fraud. The administration says states must aggressively prosecute fraud or risk losing federal support for anti-fraud units. The message from Washington is simple. Taxpayer money must be protected, fraud will be exposed, and public benefit programs will no longer operate as open targets for abuse. The Trump administration is deferring $1.3 billion in Medicaid reimbursements tied to California hospice providers while fraud concerns are reviewed. Federal officials say suspicious billing patterns triggered the action. California officials are pushing back, but the administration says the crackdown is about stopping fraud before it drains public programs and protecting taxpayers from organized abuse of the system. The VP-led task force to eliminate fraud is now using X to put those cases in front of the public. Senator Dick Durbin is making one final push for the DREAM Act before leaving Congress. Durbin has backed the bill for decades, arguing it would provide legal status for young immigrants brought to the country as children. The issue now returns to the center of the immigration debate as Congress faces another fight over border enforcement, citizenship, and who gets legal protection. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp called a special legislative session to redraw congressional and legislative maps. The June session is expected to address redistricting and voting system issues following court and political pressure. Georgia is once again back at the center of the national election map fight, and the outcome could affect control of key seats in the next cycle. The Senate voted 99-0 to advance a resolution that would withhold senators' pay during future government shutdowns. The measure, backed by Senator John Kennedy, still needs final passage, but the message was clear. If Washington shuts down the government, lawmakers should not keep collecting pay while American families and federal workers take the hit. Kevin Warsh has been confirmed by the Senate as the next chairman of the Federal Reserve. The vote was 54-45, mostly along party lines, with Warsh preparing to replace Jerome Powell. He takes over at a difficult moment with inflation pressure, high interest rates, Federal debt, political pressure, and market uncertainty all hitting the central bank at once. The U.S. Treasury sold 30-year bonds at a 5% yield for the first time since 2007. The auction shows growing pressure in the bond market as investors demand higher returns for long-term government debt. Higher yields can hit mortgages, business loans, federal borrowing costs, and the broader economy, making this a warning sign for Washington's spending habits. Nippon Steel reported a sharp collapse in fiscal year profit, with net profit down about 95%. The company cited difficult market conditions, one-time losses, rising costs, and broader geopolitical risk. The steel sector remains under pressure as tariffs, trade fights, weak demand, and global uncertainty continue to hit major producers. New York Governor Kathy Hochul pledged another $4 billion in state support tied to New York City's budget problems. Supporters frame the money as help for city stability, while critics call it a bailout for runaway spending. The fight now turns to taxes, pensions, migrant costs, city services, and whether Albany is covering for years of poor local management. Energy Secretary Chris Wright said the United States is accelerating production of uranium components, high explosives, and other critical weapons materials. The statement points to a broader push to strengthen America's strategic weapons infrastructure. The focus is national defense, supply chain security, and rebuilding the hard power capacity needed in an increasingly unstable world. Representative Thomas Massey's re-election fight is drawing new attention amid personal allegations from a former girlfriend. Massey remains one of the most independent voices in Congress, often clashing with both parties and rejecting pressure from leadership. The story adds political heat as he prepares for another campaign cycle, and national attention builds around his race. White House counterterror official Sebastian Gorka linked Tucker Carlson's rhetoric to extremism during recent comments. The remarks drew attention because Carlson remains one of the most influential voices on the political right. The exchange highlights the growing fight over foreign policy, populism, free speech, and how dissent gets labeled in Washington. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries claimed the ghost of the Confederacy is haunting the nation. The comment came during a heated political fight over race, history, and congressional power. Jeffries is using civil rights language to frame Republican actions, while critics say the line is political theater meant to inflame rather than solve. California Governor Gavin Newsom is facing criticism over reports that the state spent $189 million on tablets for prisoners, including serious offenders. Supporters say the tablets help with education and communication inside prisons. Critics say the spending shows misplaced priorities, while ordinary Californians struggle with crime, taxes, housing costs, and failing public services. The Justice Department is fighting state bar disciplinary authorities over complaints targeting federal government lawyers. DOJ has proposed a rule that would limit or pause certain state bar actions while the department conducts its own review. Supporters call it protection from weaponized complaints, while critics say it shields government attorneys from outside accountability. Alexander Soros announced a major investment tied to safety and protection for communities of faith. The announcement drew attention because Soros-backed political spending remains a major issue on the right. Supporters call it philanthropy, while critics argue Soros money carries political influence wherever it goes. The story fits into the larger fight over money, power, public trust, and who funds the political machine.
At shop.isawaya.com, everything you buy supports Acun.top, the place where people talk freely no matter what. Check out our Acun Honey Pot, a jar of yummy honey that's as strong as your voice. Put it on toaster and tea. It's not just honey, it's freedom in every bite. Then there's Acun Butter, a smooth handmade skin cream that makes you feel good while you fight for what's right. Awesome wood and pieces for display only. Hang them up or set them out. They're for showing off Acun's tough spirit. Want to help even more? Get a proto membership. So go to shop.isawaya.com now and grab some goodies. Help Acun.top keep free speech alive, and let's keep the ideas flowing loud and free.
All reports can be found on Q Research or Qnotables.com. Notables do not equal endorsements. We are researchers who deal in open source information, reasoned argument, and dank memes. We do battle in the sphere of ideas and ideas only. We neither need nor condone the use of force in our work here.
From the Q Research Board's May 14, 2026, Judge Barbara Lagoa is being highlighted by conservatives as a model for how the Supreme Court should rule on birthright citizenship. The issue centers on the meaning of the 14th Amendment and whether automatic citizenship applies in every circumstance. This could become one of the biggest constitutional battles of the year, with immigration, sovereignty, and citizenship all on the line. The Coast Guard marked National Police Week by honoring federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement officers. The tribute recognized those who serve, those who were injured, and those who died in the line of duty. It was a reminder that behind the politics are men and women still doing the job, still taking the risk, and still holding the line. Tacoma is moving to restrict ICE activity on city property, adding another front to the national fight over immigration enforcement. Supporters call it local control and protection for immigrant communities. Critics say it interferes with federal law enforcement and makes immigration law harder to carry out. The city is now part of a wider clash between local policy and federal authority. Election integrity and intelligence accountability. New reports are reviving concerns about Dominion voting machine source code and whether election system software creates a national security vulnerability. The argument is that proprietary code, outside access, and long-standing technical concerns deserve deeper scrutiny. Election security remains one of the biggest unresolved trust issues in American politics, and the public wants answers, not slogans. Just the news reports that FBI documents reveal a plot to re-indict President Trump. The report is fueling renewed scrutiny of federal law enforcement actions against Trump and his allies. The central issue is whether federal power was used for legitimate prosecution or political targeting, and whether the American people were given the full truth about what happened behind the scenes. A CIA whistleblower testified before the Senate Homeland Security Committee and accused Anthony Fauci of influencing the government's COVID origins review. The testimony claimed that lab leak evidence was downplayed and that intelligence conclusions were shaped behind the scenes. Fauci denies wrongdoing, but the hearing has reopened major questions about transparency, accountability, and who controlled the official COVID narrative. CIA whistleblower James Erdman testified that Fauci played an intentional role in steering COVID origins analysis away from the lab leak theory. Erdman also said documents were withheld and internal experts were overruled. The testimony puts pressure back on the intelligence community and public health officials over one of the most important accountability questions of the pandemic era. Reports and congressional statements raise serious questions about JFK and MK Ultra files removed from the DNI's control while being processed for declassification. Representative Paulina Luna demanded answers and said the CIA has 24 hours to return documents to Tulsi Gabbard's office or face a subpoena motion. The fight now centers on who controls the records and whether Congress will force disclosure. Catherine Herridge reported allegations that the CIA spied on computers and phones tied to the Directors Initiatives Group. Those claims surfaced alongside whistleblower testimony about COVID origins, declassification battles, and intelligence community transparency. The central question is whether internal watchdog efforts were monitored when they got too close to sensitive material. Reports are raising questions about political donations tied to a California Democratic mayor and Congresswoman Judy Chu. The concern centers on China-linked influence and campaign money. These allegations are being watched closely because foreign influence, local politics, and congressional access remain major national security concerns. Former Kansas Governor Sam Brownback warned that America must stop treating communist China like a normal country. His message fits the broader debate surrounding Trump's Beijing trip, trade policy, religious freedom, military pressure, and Chinese influence operations. The argument is that economic engagement must not override national security. International conflict. King Charles laid out the UK government's plan to introduce a digital identity system through a Digital Access to Services Bill. Officials say the system is meant to modernize access to public services and will not be mandatory. Critics remain focused on privacy, tracking, financial control, government overreach, and the future use of centralized digital credentials. Israel's ruling coalition submitted a bill to dissolve the Knesset, setting the stage for a possible early election. The move comes during a fight over ultra-Orthodox military conscription and growing pressure inside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition. A vote could come next week, with elections potentially following later this year. The U.S. Senate rejected another Iran war powers resolution aimed at limiting President Trump's authority to continue military action without congressional approval. The measure failed narrowly, but several Republicans joined Democrats in support. The vote shows concern in Congress even as the administration argues it has the authority it needs to protect American interests. Australia's first Trump Tower project has been cancelled after the developer said the Trump brand had become too controversial in that market. The decision shows how American political branding can affect international real estate projects. Supporters see the Trump name as strength, while critics see it as risk. Either way, the Trump brand remains a global political force even outside the United States. A Canadian court has thrown out a petition seeking an Alberta independence vote. The decision is another development in Canada's growing federal-provincial tension, especially over energy, immigration, taxes, and national identity. Alberta's separatism remains politically sensitive, even as the courts limit the current path forward. The European Union is considering a law that would ban or heavily restrict social media access for children. Officials say the goal is to protect minors from addiction, exploitation, and harmful content. The proposal would put Europe on the front edge of a growing global push to regulate children's online activity and force big tech into a new era of accountability. NCIS is highlighting the Golden Fleet, a Navy-focused effort to protect critical shipbuilding technology from espionage, sabotage, and technology theft. The program centers on defending America's military-industrial base at a time when naval competition is rising across the globe. In a fight with China, shipbuilding security is not just an industrial issue, it is national security. U.S. Army CH-47 Chinook crews arrived in Finland to support Exercise Sabre Strike 2026. The deployment strengthens NATO readiness in Northern Europe and sends a clear signal to Russia. Finland's role in the alliance continues to grow as the United States increases military coordination across the region.
Every voice matters. The power of free speech is more important than ever. Imagine a place where you can share your thoughts freely, explore new ideas, and engage in meaningful conversations anonymously. With online anonymity, you can express yourself without fear of judgment. It's about freedom, creativity, and connection. Join the conversation that matters. Embrace your voice. Celebrate your freedom. Visit 8kun.top today. That's 8kun.top.
All reports can be found on Q Research or Qnotables.com. Notables do not equal endorsements. We are researchers who deal in open source information, reasoned argument, and dank memes. We do battle in the sphere of ideas and ideas only. We neither need nor condone the use of force in our work here.
From the Q Research Board's May 14, 2026, Crime and Corruption. Federal officials say 27 cruise ship workers were deported after investigators found child sexual abuse material during inspections involving cruise employees, including workers connected to Disney cruise operations. The case has drawn national attention because of the number of workers involved and the seriousness of the material found by authorities. A former Tennessee sheriff's deputy pleaded guilty to producing child sexual abuse material. The case is especially disturbing because it involves a former law enforcement officer accused of exploiting the very trust placed in public officials. Sentencing will determine the final punishment, but the guilty plea confirms the criminal conduct. A Loudoun County, Virginia school district is facing serious questions after reports that a student filmed classmates in a bathroom over an extended period. Local authorities are investigating and school officials say they are cooperating with law enforcement. Parents are demanding answers about safety, transparency, and how long administrators knew about the allegations. Former Brooklyn Supreme Court Justice Edward King and two others were charged in a federal wire fraud conspiracy. Prosecutors say investors were misled into placing millions of dollars into an escrow account tied to a fake real estate deal. The case now moves through federal court, with the defendants facing serious financial crime allegations. Federal agents raided locations connected to anti-ICE activist Leo Martinez and VC Defensa in California while executing search warrants. Martinez has been tied to previous clashes involving immigration enforcement activity. Supporters call it political intimidation, while critics say federal authorities are cracking down on interference with lawful immigration operations. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is expanding investigations into H-1B visa fraud involving nearly 30 North Texas businesses. Conservative commentator Sarah Gonzalez has drawn attention to suspected abuse in the state. Officials say the probe is focused on whether companies used fake or misleading operations to obtain foreign worker visas. A grief book author convicted of poisoning and killing her husband has been sentenced to life without parole. The case shocked the public because she had presented herself as a grieving widow, while prosecutors said she was responsible for the murder. It is now one of the most disturbing true crime cases of the year. Another California Democrat is facing a sexual harassment controversy, adding to a growing list of misconduct allegations in state and local politics. The latest case renews questions about workplace culture, accountability, and whether political allies are protected until public pressure becomes too strong to ignore. The son of former Mississippi Governor Kirk Fordyce has died in a plane crash. He was described as a passionate warbird pilot, and the aviation community is mourning the loss. Officials will investigate the crash, while family and friends remember a life closely tied to flight and service history. Rudy Giuliani is out of the hospital after recovering from pneumonia. The former New York City mayor and Trump attorney had been receiving medical care and is now recovering. His condition drew concern from supporters who have followed his long legal and political battles. A Sarasota woman has been sentenced to 14 months in prison for making threats against MAGA supporters. The case shows how political rhetoric can cross into criminal threats when violence is involved. Federal authorities say political disagreement does not excuse intimidation or threats of harm. An administrator connected to a Virginia state employee charity program has been sentenced for stealing more than $1.5 million. The case shows how public trust programs can be exploited when oversight fails. Prosecutors say the stolen money was meant for charitable purposes, not personal enrichment. Detransitioner. Chloe Cole canceled an appearance at the University of Washington after threats from Antifa-linked activists. Cole has become a prominent critic of youth gender transition practices, making her a frequent target of protests. The cancellation raises serious questions about free speech, campus safety, and political intimidation. Tech and culture. Google and SpaceX are negotiating a launch deal for orbital data centers. The concept would move high-powered computing infrastructure into space where energy, cooling, communications, and security could work very differently. If successful, it could reshape cloud computing, satellites, artificial intelligence infrastructure, and the next phase of digital power. Google is facing criticism after rejecting TruePlay games over the use of a Jesus image while allowing darker religious or occult imagery elsewhere. The dispute has become another flashpoint over big tech moderation, religious expression, and whether Christian content is treated differently online. The T1 Trump phone is shipping this week, drawing attention from supporters and critics alike. The device is being marketed as part of a broader Trump-branded tech push. The launch enters a crowded phone market, but the political branding gives it a built-in audience and raises the larger question of whether conservatives can build real alternatives to big tech platforms and devices. Closing segment. Tonight's rundown starts in Beijing, where President Trump and Xi Jinping are meeting face-to-face at a moment of major global pressure. From China and Iran to Medicaid fraud, CIA whistleblowers, digital ID, election security, H-1B abuse, child exploitation arrests, and big tech control, the pattern is clear. Power is being challenged, records are being demanded, and the public is watching institutions that operated in the dark for too long. That is the show for tonight. Share this broadcast, subscribe for more, and stay locked in as we continue tracking the stories the corporate press ignores, buries, or explains away. The truth does not expose itself. It takes eyes, records, pressure, and people willing to keep digging.
Don'tDeleteMeBro.com. 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 Share the site with others. Don'tDeleteMeBro.com. 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 Share the site with others. Don'tDeleteMeBro.com.
That's all for now. Stay alert, stay informed, and never hand your thinking over to anyone on a screen, including me. God bless you, God bless our troops, and God bless the United States of America. See you soon.